Hello and welcome to the Curator's Salon podcast. I'm Geeta Joshi, and today I'm delighted to have my guest, Tim Fowler. Welcome, Tim.
Hey Geeta, how you doing? Thanks for having me
And
on.
of course, you're very welcome. I think our podcast is a little bit overdue.
Definitely.
You currently have the exhibition on at the Attenborough Centre called The Ground. Can you give us a bit of background on that? It opened in October and it runs all the way through till the end of January, so people have still got a bit of time to see it.
Yeah, so the ground is I guess, continuation of an ongoing project I started around 2 years ago. Basically, it's all botanically focused, but especially I'm looking into Caribbean plants, Barbados. That's where my family are from. So it started looking into, I guess, plants that really started off Bayesian history. So plants that came over with the slaves for the transatlantic slave trade, plants that they brought over as a food source, as medicinal plants, cash plants, so sugarcane, coffee, cotton, and then really it developed from there. At that point, I really was just researching for my own general interest. I didn't come into this with much knowledge myself. So it was very much a big learning curve for me. I recently went out to Barbados to kind of focus a bit more specifically on areas that I was unsure about. So not just the obvious plants like banana, plantain, the sugar cane, which Barbados was known for, but I guess the lesser known medicinal plants that had more of a traditional importance to them. So coming back from that trip almost gave me a new direction, but still the botanical focus and still Barbados specifically.
And there's a really interesting story I'd like you to share about your interest on that, because you say it was after taking a DNA test and recognizing your own heritage in that way that your representation of the plants is kind of following that same migratory journey.
Yeah, so the DNA test, I guess, started as more separate to the art. It was a personal thing. I was curious. From a mixed race heritage. So my mum's side of the family are from Barbados. My dad's side is white. So I did this DNA test with the idea that it would come back various different islands in the Caribbean. You know, my granddad's from Trinidad, so I expected to see these kind of islands. But when it came back, it showed me all these West African countries, which obviously I knew that the Caribbean people came from Africa initially, but it almost seemed like it was so far back for me that it didn't almost didn't seem real. You know, I didn't feel a connection. I didn't really expect to see that. So when you see it in black and white in front of you, the percentages of all these different African countries, half of them I'd not even heard of. You know, my African knowledge is it wasn't great, um, and I guess that really solidified. It's difficult to explain. It's a feeling, you know. It was something that I'd not really looked into before, but suddenly it was there, black and white in front of me. So it really changed the way I looked at myself and my history, and made me look at things that I'd not looked at in the past. So yeah, it was it's quite hard for me to put into words because it was an overlap of my artistic practice as well as something that was personal to me, and they kind of came together, like you said, through the plants and the migration of the plants from Africa, specifically West Africa, to the Caribbean.
Before this body of work, were you always painting plants and botanicals?
The botanicals probably came around, I guess I'm coming up to 4 years now. So over the years, I've changed subject matter a few times. I started out when I graduated from university, I was painting buildings. I'd paint these derelict factories, similar style and colors, I guess, to what I paint now. But yeah, the subject matter was totally different. Then I started to look into portraits. I was doing portraits for quite a few years, specifically like the kind of pop icons. But to me, I was never really interested in the people I was painting. You know, I'd paint Audrey Hepburn, and people talked about Audrey Hepburn. I was really open about it. I was like, look, I don't care about Audrey Hepburn. For me, the portraits, it was about the painting, it was about the colors, the marks, and how to kind of construct these faces. So after a while, it really, I just I guess I felt like I'd come to the end of what I could do and how I wanted to develop my work. I couldn't really continue with portraits, so I started to paint. Well, I attempted some abstract paintings. I found that quite difficult. Not having going from having a structure, composition to suddenly just having nothing. I think a lot of people think that abstract painting is easy, and I guess certain styles of abstract painting is easier than others. But I think for really good abstract painters, it's a lot harder than it looks, if that makes sense. Um, so yeah, I'm starting to paint these abstract paintings. But at the time in my studio, another artist, he brought some banana plants in. It was the winter. He'd cut them, he dug them up from his garden to kind of hibernate them. This was all new to me at the time, but anyway, I let him put them in my studio. So I'm painting these abstracts and I'm just trying to be loose and trying to develop and experiment, I guess. But I've got all these banana plants around me and the leaves, really massive, beautiful leaves. And I'd never really been into plants before, or I'd guess I'd never really focused on them like I do now. But having them around me, they just started slowly to creep into my practice. So I was doing these abstract paintings, but then there'd be a slight leaf coming in or um, the outline of a stem or something. And then at that point, it was quite funny because everyone who saw these paintings was like, "Oh, you paint banana plants because of your Caribbean history." And I was at the start, I wasn't, and it almost I guess, push me away from doing that even more because I didn't like the idea of being put in this black artist, brown artist box. Um, but like we said about the DNA test, that was something separate, but I was doing this at the same time. So the banana plants are creeping into my practice from a subject matter composition interest, but at home, I'm doing this DNA test and I'm getting the results back. And then lockdown hit. So I couldn't go into the studio and I was at home homeschooling my children. So I had more time to research and look into my history, the Bayesian history. So it was almost these two separate things that organically kind of merged together. And when I stopped fighting it, I was like, you know what, why am I fighting this box that people aren't even really trying to put me in? That's just how they see it. And that's when I started to do more research into, I guess, the history of Barbados and from a botanical point of view and the migration of the plants and how they came with the people. And yeah, I guess it all just kind of stemmed from these two avenues.
There's so many things I want to unpack there. One
Yeah,
is I love that. I mean, I think it is a bit of a journey to find your, the thing that resonates with you the most, and this sort of congruence, it seems, of like the timing, right, with the DNA test, with your friend leaving a banana plant, with that kind of feeding into the composition of your work and all of that. It's all, it's really good looking back to be able to see, like, actually, yeah, there was this, intersection where all these things kind of happened around the same time and sort of fed the thinking and the physical production of the art there as well. And then the idea of abstract art, that just didn't like vibe with you because obviously you did go to art school. But something I've seen a lot amongst a lot of self-taught abstract artists is that what you said there is, it can be really difficult. And especially when they don't understand it, things like composition or even the chiaroscuro and things like this within abstract painting that actually does exist. It can feel like they're just doing like, bootleg Malevich or a bootleg
yeah,
and stuff, right? It's like, no, haven't quite got the harmony. And sometimes I think with the abstract painters that, you see their work and there's something about it that's so vibrant and moving. When you look into their personal, their training as an artist, you see that they actually did have some training in like the figurative and realism and things like that, right? So they understand that kind of depth and where the eye is being pulled to and disrupting perceptions and all these sorts of things.
yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, just that was totally it. And I think I didn't understand any of that going into it. So it was, I'm glad I did it. I learned a lot from it. It's something that I'm sure years down the line I will come back to abstract art. I think I just wasn't ready for it. I didn't have the understanding of it, of to take it where I wanted to take it, and but it was fun, and it was a nice ending with the portraiture, and really feeling like I'd hit a kind of, like I said, almost like a brick wall. It was good just to loosen up and just to try some stuff and splash paint around and learn. Things don't always work, but I learned that it didn't work, so it changed and developed from there.
So having tried a number of different genres, I suppose, I don't want to like categorize you as a landscape artist or anything, too fixed or rigid at the moment. Having moved through different genres, as you say, especially with portraiture. I know you showed in the US and you showed at a few other places. Can you take us through some of your exhibiting history?
Obviously, I'm born and raised in Leicester. I'm still based in Leicester. For me, um, it was clear that I needed to get into London. I needed to get into the bigger cities to really build my name. So before I had really much involvement with galleries, offering me shows, the early days, I'd do a lot of independent art fairs, and I think the other art fair was a really great starting point for me. Um, it obviously brought me into London. There was a lot of people coming through. It gave me the chance to talk to people face to face about my work. You spend so much time as an artist just painting and doing the work that sometimes you don't know why you're doing certain things. So it's not until you're answering questions and speaking to people that you really start to go into your own subconscious of why you did certain things and how it's come about. So yeah, I started out doing a lot of other art fairs, and then it got to a point when I wanted to do bigger kind of gallery led fairs, and there was some other like minded artists with me in Leicester. So um, a friend of mine, Tom Van Herewich, is another artist. We shared a studio. We decided to do the affordable art fair in New York, which is obviously a gallery led fair. So we um, signed up as a kind of collective essentially, and we went out there together, and yeah, we put on like I guess it's like a two-man show, but obviously part of an art fair. Um, so yeah, we did that. We've also done the other art fair, the same collective, studio name collective, at the London, the Battersea, the Hampstead. So really, we were just all very ambitious artists that at the time didn't have galleries that were taking us to these fairs. So we were like, let's just do it ourselves. We're not going to sit around and wait to get noticed. We all were working hard and had the same kind of goals. Um, since then, I've signed with Clarendon Fine Art. So last year was my third solo exhibition with them. So I've shown in their Hampstead Gallery, the Battersea Power Station Gallery, and their Edinburgh Gallery. Um, and that was amazing. Clarendon, they're a massive gallery group. They sell a lot of artwork. They're very clued into promotion and PR. I went into that thinking I knew everything about the art world at my stage, and because I've got a good Instagram and I can advertise my own work and do the marketing, blah blah blah. But that was a whole eye opener to working with big galleries and having that PR marketing team behind you and the vision of how they put together shows. I mean, the art world, it's a crazy place, and there's unwritten rules that people know, but then there's also things you don't know until you start to do them. So every step of my career has been really like a learning journey. Some things work out, some things don't. A lot of the stuff obviously they don't teach at university, so it is a case of trial and error. And there's been people I've worked with along the way, other artists, galleries, mentors like yourself that have helped direct me in certain areas and give me advice and feedback. Yeah, what I'm trying to say really is that I've just tried to do whatever I can and take whatever opportunities that have come up throughout my career, and see if it works. You
I love
know,
that though. I love that, you were around people that were also prepared to invest in themselves to show at the fairs, right? This is something that puts off a lot of artists about showing at an artist's own fair, like the other art fair, or clubbing together with other artists for something like the Affordable Art Fair, where you present essentially as a gallery format, and a lot of print studios do it and artists group together to do it. And the investment on that one is much higher. So to do that over in New York, and, incur all the shipping and travel costs with that is, really shows you backing yourself with that.
Yeah, it was definitely risky, like you said, the amount of money that it cost just to get the work over there. But I've always been very confident in myself and very ambitious. Like I said, even shipping the work out there, the price they quoted me was out of my budget to get the work there and back. So I was like, you know what, I'll pay to ship the work there. I hopefully I'll sell as much as I can. Whatever doesn't sell, I will take off the stretchers, take out the frames, and just roll them up and bring them back in a tube. Thankfully, I sold the majority of the work, so the risk paid off. But yeah, yeah, it was a big risk. But you've got to do these things. I think artists a lot of the time, especially when you're young or you're emerging, that there's this romantic dream that you're going to do this one really amazing piece and a gallery's just going to pick you up out of the blue, and then that's it, you've made it, and you don't have to push anymore, which might happen rarely. But for me, I was always like, right, I've just got to keep pushing, not give up. I've done fairs where I've not sold anything, where I've lost money. I've had solos where barely anyone's turned up. Some artists would, they'd give up at those points. But yeah, for me, it was just never an option. And like I said, thankfully, I'm very self-confident, so it would take a lot to crush my spirits. I might sulk for a few days, but give me a week and I'll be back painting the studio and be like, okay, I've learned what I did wrong for this fair or for this show, whatever it is. Oh, I should advertise it more or change the sizes of the work or whatever it is. You try and learn from it and take that forward.
Yeah, there's going to be growing pains, right? I mean, this is where sometimes it is from trial and error or being around other people that have, kind of tested the waters ahead of you and things like that. But that resilience in sticking to it, right? Knowing that there's an audience out there for your work somewhere, even if they were not in your field of, wherever you were showing, or they were not showing up on your Instagram, or they were not showing up at the fairs. I think there's a really beautiful sentiment in there that is like, well, they are out there. We've just got to hang on in here and not give up before, this is all just building momentum, right? It's so easy to give up too readily and too soon, especially if you're not seeing the results fast enough. And I think that is something that social media has also shown us, that sometimes we expect results too fast, right? There's a lot of people selling, like, I don't know, passive income schemes and this and that, and those get rich quick schemes that feel very like seductive in the way they're advertised in high speed format on socials. But being an artist, it is at the long game, right? Your work is going to evolve. It has evolved. You've grown. And just as your audience has grown, and the impact you're having with your work and things like that. But that all led to recently, obviously, your show opened at Attenborough Centre in October, and that show has been visited by so many people. Isn't the story that it's had more that's the show that's had more visitors than anywhere before?
Yeah, yeah, it's like the most attended show I guess they've had, which is great. Um, that's been a whole new experience for me as well, because I've done independent exhibitions I've put on myself. I had shows with commercial galleries. Recently Clarendon have, had some really great shows, but this is more of an institution. So Attenborough is part of Leicester University, so it's not a selling show. It's not a commercial space. Um, it is a very large space as well, so it's given me the opportunity to show some of my bigger pieces. I think the biggest one there is 4 meters by 3 meters. So the whole, again, this is another learning curve for me. Working with this type of gallery and going into a show where I'm not focused on sales. I'm not. Sometimes you have these solo shows and it's the opening night where really you make the sales, and then it's up for a week or two after. Then that's it. You're left almost like an anticlimax at the end of it. But because this is on for like 4 months, it's really had time to grow and to spread by word of mouth. I'm hearing all around Leicester. Oh, have you been to a Tim Fowler show? Have you been to the ground? I've been into loads of schools. I'm going into some colleges this week. Um, I've been working with a couple of infant schools in Highfields, which is, I guess, a poorer area of Leicester. It's very um, ethnic, a lot of Asian kids, refugee kids, African children, and it is really sweet because it's a school that hasn't got a lot of money behind it. So all these kids walk to the gallery from the school, and they're all like 6, 7 years old, and they've never seen paintings this big before in their lives, and they've never met a real artist before. And me being a mixed race artist, and for them to see someone that looks like some of them and someone from Leicester who's got this massive show, and I feel like they make me feel like a celebrity, and they're like, wow, you're Tim Fowler, you're the artist. And so this is a side of things that I've not experienced before, because for me it's always been more the commercial side, the selling. So what we're
Love that
planning.
though. I love that. Obviously, it's expanding you in that way, right? With the institutional show, the non-profit space, the association with Leicester University. I can't even remember what the word is, but all these kind of collateral events, right? They have these sort of teaching engagement type of things, right? There's activities at the gallery itself, and then there's the outreach sort of things where you're going into the schools and bringing the schools in. And it has a much more of an educational program around that, which is very much more focused around the cultural discourse there, as well as, the making of the art, compared to the commercial side, where essentially the focus is there on the sales, right? It's the private views, it's the artist talk, it's the, closing night or whatever. They're just very kind of different events, and the outcome or expectation for each of those is so different. So it's really interesting to see you kind of being stretched to experience all of those aspects of, being in the art world, right? Because
Yeah, that's exactly it. Because obviously the commercial side is still very much in, part of my practice. It's important. It's where my money comes in. The work, apart from the scale, is the same. It's not like I'm doing a totally different style of work for this show. So I'm staying true to my style of painting and how I brand myself, but it's the kind of the other side of the art world that I've not experienced before. So it's always been important for me to try and do both, because again, I'm super ambitious. I want to be at the Tate Modern someday. I want to do it all. So being able to do these massive paintings in this space, again, I'm on the curriculum with these schools now. They're learning about me. It's yeah, again, it's all really overwhelming for me, and I find it sometimes hard to talk about, like how hard to put into words, because I'm grateful for all the opportunities, and Attenborough and Clarendon and yourself and all these other people that have supported the projects and helped me build my career. Um, and it was a position that I've always wanted to be in, and I've kind of inside I knew I was going to get to these levels. But when you're actually doing these shows and it's here, it's sometimes I step back, I'm like, wow, this is strange, this is overwhelming. I don't know what to say. Like, it's almost like I'm a celebrity at the moment in Leicester. People stop me in the gym and they're like, oh, on the street, they're like, oh, you Tim Fowler, oh, I love your show. I saw your exhibition last week. And it's great to just to hear this from people and get this feedback.
amazing. So obviously, like with the teaching element and things like that that accompany the ground at the Attenborough Centre, that's taking up a lot of time. Are you finding enough time for studio practice or not?
Um, it is difficult. I guess I'm stretching myself a little bit, but I know that I'd like to visit these schools and colleges and speak to these kids whilst the show's on, for one, but also they've made the effort to come to the show and make their own work based on my work. So it's important for me to make the time to go to visit them or go into the gallery and talk to the kids. And I know it's not forever. And also, luckily, it's very cold in my studio at the moment. So um, I've had a busy year. I've still got stuff to do. I've got commissions, but I haven't got anything super pressing that is really stopping me, preventing me from going to the schools at the moment. So it's not something that I could do, at the same time as my practice for the rest of my life. But yeah, it just makes sense while the show's on. Before I was full-time artist, I'd work as a TA in a behavioral school in Leicester teaching art. My dream was never to be an art teacher. I don't want to be a teacher, but I guess it's nice getting back to working with some kids, and it's just refreshing to speak to kids about artwork, even though the ground is obviously a show around Barbados and the crops and the medicinal plants and the traditional history. At the same time, the show is a very visual show. It's a very big, bright, colorful, Tim Fowler painting. So you don't need to necessarily look at the concept or understand it or even care about it. Little kids that can barely read can come and be like, "Oh wow," or normal people in the streets that would maybe have never visited a gallery before can come and just enjoy the show visually. They don't need to read the blurb. They don't need to have any interest in Black history or Caribbean history or plants or anything. They can just come and enjoy. So that was always in my mind prior to the show. So speaking to people, different types of people, it's nice that it's materializing the way I wanted it to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's not pushing an agenda down people's throats, right? It can be kind of consumed or sort of, as you say,
Yeah.
absorbed in different levels. Let's talk about the big work, right? Because this exhibition has some really, really large pieces. As you said, the largest there is 4 meters by 3. And this is not what we're used to seeing of your work, especially at Clarendon. I know you stretched yourself again, like it's always like you're setting yourself these little personal challenges of what would it be like to make something really big, something that's physically larger and taller than I am. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head with that. It's that challenging myself, and I'm a competitive person, but I'm only competitive with myself and what I can do. I'm not trying to be better than other artists or anything like that. But when I go to Tate Modern or Saatchi or Gagosian, whatever these big galleries are, and I see these massive canvases, when I see that, all I'm thinking is, I want to do that. I want to work at that scale. Um, and this was the perfect opportunity to continue that. I've worked I've worked this size before, but it was never with a goal in mind. It was working big because I had the opportunity to work big, and then I'd finish, roll them up, and nobody would ever see them apart from social media. So when Attenborough approached me about the show, and I knew the size of the gallery, I knew the scale I could paint at. I really wanted to take advantage of that. Because, like you said, other galleries don't often have the wall space for this, and if I'm doing it from a commercial point of view, then working this size is difficult if you haven't got the collector base to accommodate paintings of this size. So yeah, it was that challenging myself. It was that chance to develop, because obviously painting of that size, it's a different style of painting. And I always say, like, if you're painting small, it comes from the wrist or it comes from the elbow. But these paintings are so big, it comes from the shoulder. You have to use your whole body. You have to use step ladders. You have to sellotape brushes to broom handles and throw buckets of paint at it to get the desired effect. So yeah, it was a great opportunity, but also was a challenge. It was physically very difficult because I make all the canvases myself. I stretch them myself, prime them myself. So it's a physical process, but I've learned so much from it. Just little things that you can't do at a smaller scale, which you can do at this size. But it's something I can transfer back smaller in the future. So it's painters will understand what I'm saying, but certain people that don't paint might not understand it. But yeah, no, it's been great, and having the chance to do this is it's definitely opened up another, I guess, door in my brain.
Is the large work something you're going to be continuing with, or have you flipped?
Yeah,
I know you
definitely.
said you've got like some commissions that you need to complete and things like that, which are usually on the smaller scale for you.
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously got to do both. I've got some really big shows lined up with Clarendon next year, so I'll have to scale it down a bit again. It's nice to have a break actually from painting big all the time. There's certain things that are very difficult when you're painting big. But I said to myself, even if I haven't got any opportunities or any um, projects that are going to house paintings of this size. I'm going to keep painting big, in between other stuff. So maybe every couple of months I'll do a large piece just to keep that momentum going, and again, just to keep developing. I'm lucky that I have a big warehouse studio that can comfortably house paintings of this size, so I can do them and then I can just stick them to one side, and then they're not going to get in the way. I don't have to take them apart and roll them up or rent out a storage unit. So yeah, I said to myself, just every so often, just go back to it, do a large piece. um
Yeah, I think it's a bit like keeping your hand in, right? So you don't lose that muscle memory and all those sorts of things. And
exactly, yeah.
remember what
Yeah.
that feels like on that larger scale there as well. One thing we haven't mentioned, Tim, is some of the research that went into putting on this Attenborough exhibition, the show at the Attenborough Centre. I know you spent some time, like you've mentioned already, in Barbados, but then you were also at various universities and Kew Gardens. Can you share more about the research that went into putting together this exhibition?
Yeah, so like I said, this has been such a exploration research project where I often didn't know where I was going. I was just trying to soak up as much information and speak to as many different people as possible. So, like I mentioned, going out to Barbados, I met Sharon Cook, who's a curator at Andromeda Botanical Gardens over there. So she taught me a lot about the traditional plants I was looking into, the history of a lot of them, answering certain questions, and just she was really just a wealth of knowledge and experience to really the specific areas I was interested in, the history of Barbados and the plants, the two things that were my main focus. She's has the same interest, knowledge, a lot more experience than me. So she was really helpful and pointed me in the direction of books, plants to look at, gave me a tour around the gardens. We still speak regularly. But then yeah, also having access to Leicester University. So I managed to get a tour basically throughout this whole exhibition. I was making a short documentary called The Ground, and we were filming everything from the kind of the initial concept to the beginning of the painting to the actual painting. So, and also interviews with certain people. So, apart as part of that, we went to Leicester University's library, their special collection library, where they have all these really old botanical illustration books, and they're getting them all out with the white gloves and the bean bags to protect them in the temperature controlled fireproof underground rooms and all this stuff. So that was great. I learned a lot of, I guess, some of the history of the plants I was already looking at, but from a different narrative. So looking at them from the point of view of a botanical illustrator who didn't have cameras and would go out to these foreign countries and sketch these plants like scientifically. And I found a lot of comparisons in what they were doing and what I was doing, but with a very different result. They're trying to accurately document these plants, and I was doing the same thing, but accuracy was never important for me. The colors were changing, the leaves were changing. I was changing everything about them, but I was using that as the basis. So I really like that contrast between what they were doing and what I was doing, and using some of their illustrations and recreating them in my own style. Yeah, I had an interview with Claire Anderson, who's a history professor, specializes in penal colonialism, a lot of post-colonialism, and very, very academic. A lot of publications beside her name. I was actually really nervous about speaking to her because I'm just an artist. I'm not an academic. Um, but again, that was another person who's looking at things and teaching me things from, I guess, a non-artist point of view, very academic, historical point of view, but also I'm taking bits from all these conversations and meetings, and it's just seeping into my practice.
Is this something you think you will keep pursuing, like this exploration of plants, the migratory pattern of them? Obviously, like plants as a source of inspiration for artists has been around a very, very long time. Is that something that you're still kind of drawn to?
Plants, plants in general, definitely. The composition at the moment, it still really excites me. I guess I'm becoming more general. I have been becoming more general over the years with plants and not just looking into migratory crops and Bayesian crops, but looking into just plants in general, anything and everything. At the moment, I'm definitely continuing with plants. They still really excite me, which is obviously the most important factor. I'm still enjoying what I'm doing. I'm still feeling the inspiration when I see plants, when I go to Kew Gardens. There's loads of ideas flowing. But end of the day, I'm a British artist, so I don't want to box myself into this one group of plants because it's not just the meaning behind certain plants. It's the structure, it's the composition. It's how I interpret it and how I add my Tim Fowler style of painting to it. And at the moment, that's still really excites me. So definitely for the foreseeable future, that's what I'll be painting.
So you said you've got a show lined up with Clarendon for next year, 2025. And actually, before we wrap up, I wanted to let our listeners know that this documentary that you mentioned that you made with Nick, I'm going to add a link into the show notes. And for people that are interested in learning more about your exhibition next year as well, they should sign up to your website so they can stay in the loop with that. Tim, is there anything else you wanted to share before we go?
Yeah, I'd love for more people to come and see the ground in Leicester. It's Leicester is not normally a point of destination for a lot of art lovers, but there's definitely a lot going on there. This is a great show. The scale and the colors is one that really needs to be seen in person. So for all you kind of Londoners and outsiders out there, come to Leicester, see the show, come to Attenborough.
And the show ends at the end of January 2025. So you
Yeah,
still
January. So yeah, still a couple of months to go.
amazing. Tim, I'm sure I will be speaking to you soon. Thank you so much for being my guest. I know this podcast is long overdue. And if you can't get yourself to Leicester, then you should at least check out the documentary that Tim has made with Nick, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And of course, you can get some images of the exhibition over on his Instagram as well. And I'll add add the link to that in the show notes as well. Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Geeta. Thanks for having me. Take care.